everybody. Well done. You've made it through the week. You are here with us on a Friday evening. If you're watching the show live, please stick around and get some questions in at the end. If you're listening back, thank you very much for doing so. And we hope we're filling your podcast ears with lots of writing advice and tips and guidance. And tonight's guest is going to be no different on that front, because they are an absolute mastermind of not one, not two, but three genres. So we're going to definitely pick their brains apart and try and get some really good tips for you, and also talk about their writing journey and all that good stuff. So hello to you, Anya. Hello, Chris. Thank you for joining us. And again, like I said, tonight's guest is fantastic. So please stick around and ask some questions at the end. If you've got any particular bugbear at the minute with writing, maybe you're struggling with something, maybe ask something along those lines. Equally, if you're a huge fan of tonight's guest, then obviously it's a gold mine for you, because you get to ask any questions that you want within reason, providing they're appropriate. So I'm not going to talk forever. Chris Agate is not well, so I send my fastest recovery wishes to him. Get well soon, Agate. It's better when you are with us, for sure. So get well soon. But tonight's guest, as I've said, is a psychological mastermind. So he writes psychological thrillers. He also writes horror, and he dabbles in Gothic fiction as well. I shouldn't say dabbles, because that sounds demeaning, but he's a fantastic writer. And Gothic fiction, I absolutely love it. So more of that, please. So he wrote Medlock, The Tree House, The Dinner Guest, The Garden Party. You may have heard of some of those books, because they're absolutely everywhere. I know I've seen him out and about when I've been on my shopping tours. So without further ado, I'm just going to bring him on so we can really get into having a good chat about all things writing. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome B.P. Walter.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, I am very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I love the posters that you've got of your books in the background as well. They look fantastic.
Yes, yeah, this is my little writing room, and I quite like to have them on the walls. I do have others that I need to put up in other places, but yeah, those are the two that keep me company when writing.
Brilliant. And what particular, why did you pick those two books? Because obviously you've got quite a lot, but what is it about those two?
When I had the frames done, I think I'd only had 4 books out at that point. So I think they were just the 4 books, and so I've got 2 there and then 2 other frames elsewhere. But I'm going to have to get more now, because book 10 comes out in 3 weeks, so I need to get more frames.
Yeah, so you're going to have a whole library of posters as well to go with those books. Fantastic. So one of the things we always ask when we start the show is, where in the world are you coming from, and what is the writing scene like there?
I am coming from Chelmsford in Essex, and I have a number of author friends actually who live sort of around the Essex area, but as is ever with many jobs like ours, where we do them generally from home, my author friends are dotted around the UK or the world, even. So whilst it's lovely to be able to meet up with people locally, quite often it ends up places like Harrogate Literary Festival and places like that you end up seeing people you haven't seen for a whole year before, simply because you're kind of separated by hundreds of miles. But yeah, I am very lucky though. There are a number of really great writers here in Essex.
Brilliant. Yeah. Anya says the holiday light and candle also makes the space really cozy and perfect for writing.
I do try.
Yeah, definitely does.
Yeah, I'm a big autumn fan, so I've got the autumn decorations and pumpkins and everything. So it's my favourite time.
Brilliant. Yeah, I was actually born in Chelmsford in Essex.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but I didn't live there for very long. I moved up north to Manchester, and so whenever I hear somebody from Chelmsford, I'm like, "What's it like? What's it like to live there?"
It's great. Yeah, I really like it. I'm originally from Billericay, which isn't too far away, but yeah, I really like Chelmsford. It's a nice mixture between city and town kind of vibe.
Yeah, and as you've mentioned Harrogate, we spoke to quite a few people at Harrogate Crime Writers Festival, and a lot of them worked in the publishing industry, and some of them worked and lived in Harrogate, and they said the commute into London was one of the benefits. So do you find yourself going to London quite a bit, or?
I don't go that much now. even though it's only about 25 minutes, half an hour to Liverpool Street station. But I used to live in London, and then when the pandemic hit, I moved back to Essex, and I ended up never going back to London. I stayed in Essex, but I loved it when I lived there, and it was a wonderful place. But it now feels strangely far away, even though it's only about half an hour away.
Yeah, brilliant. Right. Well, now that we've covered where you're coming from in the world, I'm just going to play a little short video, and that is the road to writing. So when we get back after this video, I'm going to ask you how writing became such a thing in your life and where it all began. So I'll just play this quick video. So BP, if you can, take us back to when writing first became a thought in your mind.
I think it was probably when I was very young, but it wasn't the sole kind of goal or job in my future I felt at that point. I think I definitely wanted to be an author at some point in my childhood, but I think I also wanted to be like a Disney animator and a film critic and various other jobs as well. But it was in there, particularly when I started reading crime fiction, probably when I was about 11 or 12. And I thought it would be wonderful to write crime novels, and I thought that would be a great thing to end up doing, but I can't say it was kind of my life's ambition as such. And when I went to university, I was very focused on potentially going to the film industry, and I did an undergrad in film and English and a postgrad in film and cultural management, which was very much setting me off to go and potentially work in film marketing and that kind of thing. But I just knew I wanted to tell my own stories, and instead of kind of packaging up other people's, which is a very creative job in many ways, but I knew I wanted to be kind of coming up with the stories myself. So that's how I that was the startings of knowing this is what I wanted to do.
And how did that university experience sort of help or hinder you? Because we've had quite a few people on the show that have been to university in a sort of creative space, as you've mentioned. And some people have said it's been brilliant and it really helped their writing. And others have said it was the worst thing I did, complete waste of time. I should have just got on with something way earlier.
I absolutely loved uni. I didn't do a degree that focused on the practical sides of writing. It was purely theoretical based. There were some modules within it that you could end up doing some practical writing. I did do a little bit, but generally speaking, it was very much the study of English literature or the study of films rather than writing literature or filmmaking. And that was completely what I wanted at the time. I wanted to study other people's works, and I loved studying 2 or 3 books a week and 2 or 3 films a week. And I think it allowed me to work out that was what I wanted to do myself by absorbing some of the best examples of storytelling. I think I found that inspiring and encouraging and probably daunting in a way, but I think it led me on to seeking out the kind of the space and time to do it myself. But it was overall a really positive experience, and I look back on those years as probably some of my best in education, I think.
So when obviously you're in the midst of studying, and you just said yourself about like digesting all of the sort of best examples of literature and film, when did you actually start putting pen to paper for your own ideas? And can you talk us through what that moment was like?
It was towards the end of my time at uni. It was towards the end of my MA, and it was around the time when, if we wanted to end up going to work in the film industry or publishing or something kind of relevant to our degrees, it was the time that we should probably start looking for jobs in those areas. And I was kind of hesitant to start. I'd done some internships in film companies, and I just wasn't sure that was really where I wanted to go. And I suddenly had an idea for a novel, and I knew it was something I was quite confident in pursuing. And more or less immediately, I decided that's what I wanted to do. As soon as I graduated from my MA, I wanted to devote as much time as I could to trying to write that particular book that had just kind of popped into my head out of thin air. And I was very lucky when I finished and moved back home with my parents. When I finished my degree, they were wonderful in allowing me the space and time to write. I was very lucky in that sense. I did work part-time in a bookshop whilst I was doing that, which itself was a great education because it allows you to see what's selling, what people are liking, what books customers are excited to talk about. So that itself was really good as well. And for about a year, I just focused on writing and working in bookshops. I did in the end go on to a full-time office job in social media, but I think that was great because it allowed me to experiment with the writing and how I wanted the plot to go and that sort of thing. And curiously, that book wasn't the one that got me an agent or a publisher, but it did end up being published as my fourth novel, weirdly, which was my fifth novel, which was The Locked Attic. Do you know, I actually have the books here with me because I do quite often podcasts and I can see the books out of sight and out of reach, and I've been really prepared and now I can hold it up. So this was the book I wrote in about 2014, 2015 when I finished uni, and it was turned down by all the agents I sent it to. And it was never offered out to publishers because I wasn't represented by agents at that point. But in the end, it did get published, which I found really exciting, even though it was kind of 5 books later down the line. And I also did very much rework and rewrite it because my writing style had changed by that point. So it wasn't as if it was just kind of click print on the very first thing. But it was nice that the book actually did end up going out there into the world.
So what was it about the idea behind the locked attic that really got you going in that first initial instant to actually write a book? Because we have a lot of people who are writers or want to be writers, and it's quite famous that first book sort of syndrome. A lot of people start one, but they never finish one. So why was that idea different, and how did you go about actually completing it?
I think I wasn't too this is probably a very not very good commercial answer, but I wasn't that hung up on genre when I was writing it. I didn't really think, considering I was working in a bookshop at the time, I don't think I thought too much about where it fits within certain genres, and I didn't think it would be crime when I wrote it. It was very much I mean, the readers who people who have read the book, readers may notice that it's probably my less crimey of all my novels, and it's much more about kind of suburbia and sort of family secrets, and these are themes that go through quite a few of my books, but this one's very much more kind of concentrated on one street in suburban Kent. And it was that kind of neighborhood toxicity that I found really compelling. And I'd read in other books as well, not necessarily crime novels, but it was something that I found intriguing and kind of enjoyed when I saw it in TV dramas. So I think that was the thing that kind of spurred me on to write it. And I think not being too kind of concerned or worried about which genre it would fit into was quite liberating at the time. It probably explains why it wasn't the book that got me agency representation, because it probably wasn't one thing or another, I think, at that point. But it was great to be able to have it later on and go back and remaster it, rework it, and that kind of thing.
So again, like, obviously you've gone through the whole process of writing a book, and then you've gone through the process of trying to get an agent with that first idea, and you've been knocked back a couple of times. At that point, some people would quit. They would go, do you know what? I've tried, didn't work out. I didn't get where I wanted to go. I'll either just leave it in a drawer and forget about it. So what made you go, do you know what? I enjoyed writing that first one. I'm going to write a second one. And how did that process happen?
I think that came about from me just having a lot of ideas, and I I think I sometimes hear other authors talk about this, or filmmaker Quentin Tarantino, I think, once said he would die before he gets to make all the films in his head. And I can understand this idea of having so many ideas and there's just not enough time to get them down on paper. So it didn't really faze me too much. Of course, every rejection in this industry is can be a quite a hard-hitting thing, but it didn't once make me think, therefore it won't happen. It just made me think, not with this book, but let's try another one. So I think I was probably quite lucky to be fairly keen just to move on to the next one if one didn't work. And I also knew some other people who had tried to end up with an agent or get published, and knew that, and I'd listened to a lot of podcasts kind of similar to this one as well about authors' publication journeys, and I knew it wasn't uncommon for it not to be the first book to get an agent and then not to be the first book to get a publisher, and I knew this wasn't an unusual kind of journey. So I think knowing that this was fairly normal allowed me to think, well, then let's just try another one then.
And did your writing process change with book 2 in terms of, you said before you didn't think about genre the first time round. Obviously, you said as well, you tweaked it as well for when it did eventually come out as a book. So did you sort of change your approach to writing with the second book? And again, what was that like?
One of the main things I did was I enrolled in the Faber Academy, and which, for those who don't know, is a course run at the publishers Faber and Faber. And my tutor was the brilliant author Rowan Coleman, and she was so encouraging and just an absolutely brilliant tutor, really, really encouraging and warm and welcoming for people who were trying to write or had the startings of a novel. And I think it was probably the third novel I was working on that I was trying to write at that point when I thought this could help maybe, or at least teach me things about the craft and the industry that would be useful, and it did both. And I think by that point I'd already written 2 whole novels and just felt I needed to do something new to try and see if we could change the direction with the next one. And the one I worked on whilst at the Faber Academy was actually my debut novel that ended up getting published. So I found that whole experience probably, I mean, it's hard to say, you never know how things would turn out if one doesn't do them, but I really think that was the thing that helped nudge me in the right direction when it came to getting an agent and getting published.
And what did going to the Faber Academy do for your actual writing? Did it just sort of tweak what was already there? Did it teach you something completely different that you'd never even considered before?
I think the best thing it taught me was how to plan. And I already sort of planned in probably a more haphazard way. And Rowan on the course was wonderful because she wasn't prescriptive in the sense that this is how you have to do it. She more let us explore ways that could work for us as students on the course. And I found that the way that really appealed to me was laying out an entire book chapter by chapter with a short summary for every chapter. And ever since then, I've done that for every book since. And I couldn't really imagine writing without doing that. And I think the course as a whole enabled me to discover for myself what kind of writer or what my sensibilities were when it came to writing. And it turns out I'm a very structured, very kind of plan in advance sort of author, rather than seeing where the story goes. And that isn't, of course, to say there's one right and one wrong, because there are many wonderful authors, and I have friends who just sit down at a blank page and write a book. But for me, that course enabled me to work out which of those 2 things I was.
So when you first started writing that very first book, what was your writing process like, and how has it changed now that you're 10 books in? And I'm going to add to that as well in terms of what do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Gosh, so much. I think my writing process, and when I wrote the very, very, very first one, I don't think I planned. I think I just went in and wrote it. I think I probably had a plan in my head, which is probably what I mean when I say I planned a certain way, but I knew where it was going, just probably not every beat getting there. But I think my process now is very, very different. It's very ordered. It's less kind of let's discover where things go. It's more I like to know exactly where things are going. And I don't think I'd got there when I wrote the second book I ever wrote, not my second publish, because I hadn't done the Faber course by that point. But by the time I was onto my third book, which was my work in progress while I was at the course, that was one that helped me start to fine tune that process a bit more. And I think I fine tuned it a bit more and a bit more with every book that went since. And my writing process has changed even over the past year or so, depending on how quickly I have to write a book, whether there's a deadline for it or not, whether it's a book I've planned out with my publishers or whether it's one that I've just come up with by myself. It can vary a little depending on what the book is. And I kind of see the process as something that I have mostly set in stone, but the stone can change color. I think that's how I think about it. I can just adapt it a little bit depending on what would suit the book at the time.
Yeah. Again, we've got a lot of people who watch the show that, again, want to be writers or are writers. And like one of the things we try and get into is the sort of numbers and try and sort of take some of the stigma away from it. So we had like Adele Parks on, for example, and she says she aims for 1,000 words a day. No, in fact, she said she does 1,000 words a day, and that's it. She's done. But we had Ben Aronovich on, and he said 250 words is a good day for him. And if he does that every day consistently without fail, he's got a book at the end of the year. So what are your like day-to-day numbers? What are you happy with on a day, and how long roughly does it take you to map out a book and write the book?
Do you know, this is one of the ways it's changed actually. I used to not focus on word count at all, and I wouldn't know at the end of each day how much I'd done or not. And that was quite deliberate in this, particularly when I used to work, when I still worked in social media coordination, I couldn't really write much during the week. I had to just write at weekends. And there were some weekends I was busy with seeing friends or family commitments, and I knew that if I held myself to a particular word count, I'd end up feeling bad for spending time doing the other things. So at that point, I kind of gave myself permission not to even look. And I loved writing so much, it wasn't as if I needed to kind of like push myself into doing it. And that mostly stayed the same. Even when I went to write full time, I still carried on without really noticing too much of the word count. And I only really changed to now. I now try and do 3,000 words a day when it's a proper full-on writing day. Different if I'm in the midst of structural edits or doing events, it can change. But if I'm in the midst of just pure writing, I try and do 3,000 words a day. And that came about last year when an order of books, publication order changed, and meant I had to write a book that was originally going to be the year after, had to be brought forwards, and had to write that quite quickly. And so I deliberately came up with a how many words a day kind of plan in order just to make sure it definitely got done. And I ended up really enjoying it and thought, why haven't I been doing this from the start? It appealed to the structured planning kind of part of my brain. And ever since then, I've now tried to do 3,000. It's a number that I don't feel like I've really stretched myself too far, but I feel like I've still made substantial progress in the manuscript. But I say all this under the sort of understanding or kind of contract with myself that it's okay to break it if I have a busy day or if I have lots of other admin-y kind of things that comes with the books coming out. It's fine if it doesn't happen. So it's a relaxed aim, I'd say.
Yeah. So you said obviously you went full-time as a writer, and this is something that a lot of people tend to struggle with in terms of like when the time is right to go full-time. You know, you've got finances and things like that to manage. So how did you come to that decision to go, do you know what, I'm going to go full-time with this? And again, can you talk us through that process?
Sure. It was when I'd had 3 books out by that point, and I knew I was going to give it a couple of books. I think I'd already kind of decided that quite early on, at least a couple of books, I should say. was well aware it could have taken more. But I was very lucky that my third book just became a very different publishing experience for me than the two books that came before it, where it just completely changed my life. It just sort of took off in a way that the books, my first two books, hadn't. And I was with a new publisher and or a new imprint, I should say, and steadily, one by one, things started to happen that hadn't happened before. We had enormous supermarket orders. It was chosen for an incredible promotion at Waterstones. Just the stars just started to seem to be aligning, and I started to think, oh, this might be the one that means I can write full time. And I was very lucky that it did turn out to be. And it was also a very good moment, I think, in terms of where the pandemic was up to, because it came out in 2021. It was called The Dinner Guest, I should say, and that book, The Dinner Guest, was ready and waiting in bookshops when everyone went back to shops. I think it was about April or late April when Boris's kind of chart of where we're up to in the lockdowns allow retail to reopen. And there was a lot of worry that people would be really hesitant and not go back, but it was the opposite. People poured back into shops. And I think bookshops, I think I read somewhere that footfall was similar to what they'd kind of expect at Christmas. And I think that timing was really lucky as well, because when the shops reopened, The Dinner Guest was there ready to be discovered on the tables. And it was just kind of gaining momentum in a way that I'd never experienced before. And it got to number 1 on the Times chart, and I didn't expect it to, because I the day before the chart was revealed, I said to a friend of mine, it definitely won't reach number 1 because there's this other big book out, and there's no way it's gonna go past that. And then the next day it did, and I absolutely couldn't believe it. It was amazing. And then after, when it hit the Sunday Times bestsellers chart, I started to think I probably should make a decision now to kind of commit to doing this as my full-time job. And I discussed it with my agent, and I then made the choice to write full-time. And also just timing. I was so stretched between doing a full-time job and trying to write as well. And, as I mentioned, there's lots of admin stuff that has to go with being an author. So that was kind of a real weight off my shoulders, being able to just make it my full-time job.
So obviously one weight off because the full-time job is gone, but obviously the success of The Dinner Guest, is that an additional weight that then you're having to bear? Because obviously if a book is hugely successful, the book after it, I can imagine that that's quite difficult to comprehend in terms of going, oh, this was so successful. Is this one going to live up to the hype? Was that something that you struggled with when you were writing the next book after The Dinner Guest?
I don't think so, because it would have done had the next 3 books not already have been written. So I knew I was writing books that would be way into the future past that, because the 3 books after that were very much kind of finished and planned out. So I don't think there was a period that kind of allowed me to be daunted, which is a very lucky position to be in, I'm aware of. But I think they were just so kind of locked down, and I knew kind of when they were coming out, or I'd even seen the covers of probably at least one, if not more. And so I think that kind of protected me in a way of not worrying too much about it. And I knew the book I was probably writing at the time wouldn't be seen for 2, 3, maybe more years from that point. So I think I was slightly shielded from that side of things.
Oh, fantastic. Like you say, pressure can work in both ways, but you planned for success, and that worked out in your favor in that instance. So with book 10 then, obviously book 1 must be really exciting, and every author or people watching the show who have aspirations of book 1 coming out and being published and having that debut experience. What's it like, and what's the difference between having a debut and then book 10? Does that change at all when the books come out?
It does. It does and it doesn't. I don't get as nervous now when the books come out. I now probably see it as a much more exciting, fun thing rather than a kind of a let's worry about this thing. It's still, there are of course still worries about it, but I think I do approach it with more of an appreciation for people reading it and people picking it up and buying it or choosing to download it. And I'm often so much in the world of the ones that I'm writing and the ones that are coming up next. I think that also helps. Whereas when you're right at the start of one's career, there's more doubts about that. And sometimes you don't even know if you've got another contract or whatever. So I think I feel very much in the midst of it all, and with a lot of other considerations. It's almost like anxiety kind of fills a vacuum, doesn't it, if there's space for it to go. And I think any kind of worries or anxiety about certain book releases doesn't have too much space to go, because I'm still dealing with lots of other books and other things. And it's particularly the case that I've kind of expanded the amount of books I'm writing and the genres I'm working in. And this year I've had 3 books out, or will have 3 books out, which are July, September and October. So the publications for those feel very kind of close together, and only one has gone, and then I'm kind of preparing for the next one. So I think that's what's changed the most. But at the same time, it still feels the same, in the sense that you're sending out this thing that you've worked really hard on out into the world, and you just really hope people will like it. And I probably feel very similar in that way than I did back in 2019 when my first one came out. The good thing now, though, is that I don't do any book launches, because I did one book launch and I found it incredibly stressful, and I feel like I've done it and that's it. And now I don't do book launches. There was a pandemic in between for books 2 and 3, so that gave me permission not to have to even think about book launches. But yeah, pandemics aside, I have carried on the trend of not doing book launches, because I find being the center of attention at a party absolute nightmare. So yeah, I don't do that.
And obviously with 3 books out in a year, that's quite a lot of parties to be the
yeah, exactly. Yeah, all I was doing. So
yeah, definitely a lot of time taken up as well, I should imagine, because it's not just one night with these things. So with that in mind, obviously you've got 3 books out this year. Normally what we do for this section is what's the story. So what we ask the author to do is to pick the story that they want to promote and give us either their elevator pitch, or you could, if you've got the books to hand, you can read the back of the blurb. It's entirely up to you how you do it. So I'm going to play this little video, and then when we get back, I'm going to ask you to give us an elevator pitch.
Go for it.
So BP, picking between 3 books, I suppose, is like picking from your children. You never know which one's your favorite at any given moment. So you give us the elevator pitch, please, for the book of your choice.
That is true. Well, the one that I will do, The Winter Visitor, because that comes out this month. I should give, the only one I've got to hand that's of those is The Treehouse, which came out in July. So that's out now if people wanted to grab that now. But the one I've got out this month is The Winter Visitor, which is actually a Christmas crime thriller. And even though it comes out in September, but that's apparently when Christmas books, they come out in September and October. And it's kind of amazing. I haven't written a Christmas thriller before now, but it's probably the most Agatha Christie-ish book I've written, where there is a murder in a Scottish castle. So the main pitch for it is there is a family, the Wayman family, who are very rich, affluent family, and have a big Scottish Highlands castle, and they're gathered for Christmas. And someone turns up, a stranger, and he says he believes he is the son of one of the 3 adult sons of the family, but he doesn't know which one. And he's there to find out who his real father is. And the whole family are just kind of shocked and horrified. All the 3 sons are partners. They don't understand how this could have happened. And there's a big storm, and the guy, they can't throw him out. So they put him up in a guest room, planning to work this out the next morning, which is Christmas morning. But the next morning, he is found dead in the guest room with a Christmas ornament through his heart. And someone in the castle has killed him during the night. and someone clearly didn't want him to get to the bottom of the secret of his parentage. So yeah, that's the basic kind of hook for the winter visitor. And yeah, it's snowy and festive, and hopefully something that people will enjoy reading as the nights start to get darker.
Yeah, wow. Andy says this book sounds amazing.
Oh.
No, fantastic. So again, obviously you mentioned there about moving around into different genres. And again, we've spoke to a lot of authors when they get pigeonholed into one sort of genre, and it's like the publisher says, no, we want you to keep going with this character or this type of fiction. So I suppose the question is, what appeals to you about moving into different genres, and how have you sort of been able to do that when you've got a really good fan base in various different genres?
I think it's partly because I like to read a variety of different genres myself, and I know many readers who don't just stick to one. So I think readers are probably more. I mean, I certainly am more tolerant of genre shifts than sometimes maybe the industry thinks they are, maybe. But I've always liked reading thrillers that I feel do something a bit different with the genre, or push boundaries a bit, maybe stray into other genres, or a little bit more unplaceable, possibly. And I've tried to do that with my books, and I'm always very grateful when readers contact me to say sometimes what they like about my books is that they all feel very different. And it's certainly something I try to do. Occasionally a name change is in order, because it can be helpful just to indicate, I think, to readers that this is quite a different proposition, which is what I did with my horror novel Scuttle last year, which was published as Barnaby Walter rather than BP Walter, just to kind of suggest to readers that it's still me, but there's something different at work within these pages. And in the case of that novel, it was giant spiders that kill people. And also with my Gothic thriller Medlock, which comes out in October, that's published under the name S.G. Hartnell. Sometimes these things are there to make things work with multiple publishers. Sometimes they're there to kind of give readers a sort of a notice to say, expect something a little bit different. But overall, when it comes to writing, I just really want to write the books that excite me when I'm writing them, ones that make me, or how I would want to read on if I was the reader rather than the writer. I think that's mostly what I set out to do. And then I try and find, or me and my agent or editor will try and find a way of making that work. So it's a collaborative process, but at the end of the day, I want to write a book that I'm happy writing, and hopefully a book that readers are keen to read.
So with The Winter Guest, then, obviously you mentioned Christie's influence potentially in terms of, trying to write in that sort of I suppose it's a locked room psychological thriller. So again, when did the idea come, and how difficult was it to write something like that? Because from a reader's perspective, obviously all the characters are very close together. You're getting different perspectives. You're trying to guess constantly, sort of like what the outcome is. So as an author, that must be quite tricky to try and keep people on their toes, but also throw in a couple of twists as well, which are going to, leave the reader with a jaw on the floor type thing. So how do you do that?
I do not know. That's the honest answer. I am a terrible author when it comes to working out where ideas came from and how they end up on the page, because and I've only come across, I think, one other author who said it very, very similar to how it works for me. And that was the author Amanda Prowse. And she said it's as if she just gets a movie downloaded into her head, and it's her job just to write out what the movie is playing. And that is exactly how it is for me, where a book wholesale gets kind of just arrives into my head, and I know it all from beginning to end right in that moment. There's usually not too much that changes. Sometimes things do, sometimes things have to change in order for twists to work, or kind of the actual structure of the story to work. But generally speaking, the basic plot and idea just arrives kind of out of nowhere, and as if magic spells happened. And I then try and plan out the novel as soon as that idea, or as close to that idea arriving as feasible, because I don't want it to go. I may end up never using it. I may end up deciding it's not worth carrying on with. But as long as I feel I capture it down in a chapter plan, I feel it's then there for me to go back to at a later date if I need to. And there will be a period of refining, I think, as I kind of go through it and getting the characters and making them feel kind of real and sort of fully developed. But in terms of where the idea comes from and how I kind of wrestle the plot, I don't feel there is any wrestling, because it is just there, really. That's a very strange and unhelpful answer, I think.
No, I suppose with that then, if we try and give people watching 3 potential tips for writing in, let's say, one for each genre, psychological thrillers, horror, and then the Gothic, what would your one tip in each genre be for people looking to write in those areas?
Horror, I'll do horror first, because I think that might be one that's probably the most helpful in terms of real kind of genre signposting, because there has to be something scary within it. And I think maybe if someone was writing a horror novel, one could consider what that writer finds scary. And I'm not necessarily saying that he or she has to put their worst fears down on paper, but I think spotting when one's own kind of reactions to things crops up can be a helpful sort of almost like a map to follow, I think, when thinking particularly about how that's going to appear scary on paper. And even though I wouldn't necessarily say I have arachnophobia, I'm not a big fan of house spiders, and we are in house spider season at the moment in the UK. Every moment, if you just move something, you're worried there's going to be something that darts out. I think even without thinking about it, I probably sort of drew on that side of things. And I'm not necessarily saying that to write a horror novel it has to be autobiographical, but I think thinking about what causes that sense of fear is probably helpful. In terms of psychological thrillers, in terms of one tip, I would probably say it's probably for me down to rhythm, because I think if someone reads a lot of psychological thrillers or murder mysteries or any kind of crime novel, I think the brain loves repetition, and the brain quickly starts to learn when certain things should happen within a book. And I think particularly voracious readers get quite good at spotting when it isn't working within a particular rhythm, when something hasn't happened for a long period of time, or when there hasn't been enough twists, or when you feel like the payoff wasn't worth it. So I think that's probably what I really bear in mind when I'm doing my chapter plans. It's that sense of rhythm, and it doesn't necessarily have to stick to a really kind of set structure, because I'm sure there are many kind of set formulas that one could find. But I think just having a sense of like when the twist should happen, a midpoint climax, this kind of thing, I found that hugely helpful when it comes to planning out thrillers, just being aware of where they go. Having said that, many people, I think, if they've read enough books and watched loads of movies, will probably know just by osmosis when those things are supposed to occur. So I think there's probably an element of just trusting oneself really with that. And lastly, with Gothic horror, I think, or Gothic thrillers, I think that's a difficult one, because I think Gothic, there is a very kind of strict historical definition of the term, but I think it has also come to me more of a sensibility and a feeling and a vibe, an atmosphere to a book that is probably more malleable when it comes to where a book can be set, when a book can be set, this kind of thing. My book Medlock is a reworking of The Secret Garden, where the character Mrs. Medlock, the housekeeper, is the main character. And for a bit, it does follow The Secret Garden quite closely, and then it does veer off in a much darker direction. And so I think if one was setting out to craft a Gothic novel, I think reading other books that have that that sensibility within them would give a great education as to how to conjure that vibe. I think it is really about atmosphere and feeling and sort of dread or something unsettling and all these other things that's different to horror as such, but they can go together as well quite nicely.
Yeah, brilliant. Some really good advice there. Yeah, love gossip. Well, I love all these genres. So that's fantastic advice for people watching. Speaking of people watching, if you're watching now, we're shortly going to be moving over to the writing community question time. So if you've got a question, feel free to send it in, and we'll ask as many questions as we can get through. But first, we're going to ask some of our staple questions, and we're going to play a little video to indicate that. So, community question time. Brilliant. So, lots of people in the comments. Again, if you've got questions, please send them in and we'll get through those. But we'll ask a few of our staple questions first. So one of the first staple questions that we have is, if you could take any character from fiction and do what you want with that character, which character would you choose and what would you do with them?
I think it would have to be the character of Ariadne Oliver from Agatha Christie's novels. She appears mostly in Poirot novels, although she does appear in The Pale Horse, which is a standalone. And she is widely kind of accepted as the most autobiographical of Agatha's creations. She is a mystery writer within Agatha Christie stories. And I think you can probably tell at times that Agatha is taking out some of her frustrations that come with being a novelist in the character of Ariadne Oliver. And I would love to have her go off on her own adventures and have a whole series of books. So yeah, it probably would be her.
On the topic of frustrations as a writer, do you have any frustrations as a writer that you're willing to share?
Oh, goodness. I try my best to just focus on the wonderful things, but I am not perfect at that. Of course, there are many frustrations, I think, that can happen. I think this is a job that kind of baked into the job. There are ups and downs and difficulties, and I think getting used to the fact that so much is out of your control as a writer can be a difficult one, and it can be hard to sit back and sometimes watch things going wrong when you can't do anything about it, or mistakes or that kind of thing that you can't really do anything about. And I think that could be hard in any profession. That could be hard. And I think as a writer, we're very used to kind of having control over our characters. But then when that book or those characters go out into the world, we sacrifice some of that control, because then it becomes a product that needs to be sold. And if someone doesn't like that, that's perfectly fine, because one can self-publish, which is a very legitimate way of telling stories. But if one wants to be published traditionally, that is something one has to reconcile with oneself, that in the end has to be a product, in the same way that, you know, school shoes or pencil cases or cornflakes or various other things are also products that have to appeal to audiences and or consumers and be bought. So with that comes many difficulties or frustrations, and if ever they crop up, I just try to focus on the things that I like and the things I enjoy and find exciting about the process, because in the end they're the most important parts.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other questions that we have that's a staple question is, if you could change the ending to any fiction, what would you change the ending to and why?
This is a difficult one, and I definitely wouldn't want to suggest I know better than the author of any known piece of literature. But the one that popped into my head actually was the ending to The Hunger Games, the very last of the Hunger Games trilogy, before the more recent two books came out, the original trilogy, where, spoiler alert, if someone by an amazing miracle hasn't come into contact with the Hunger Games books or films at this point, like maybe mute or something, because I'm about to say something that happens at the end of the last Hunger Games book and film. But there's a bit, for those who know it, there's a bit where all the victors decide, once they've seized control of and they've won the kind of civil war, essentially, the idea is floated to re-establish the Hunger Games, almost as a form of revenge against the people that have terrorized them, and they all agree to it. including Katniss, the main character. And there's an important reason why she agrees to it, because she's got a plan to do something later on. But I always thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if the book or if the film just stopped there, and it had it that Katniss had been twisted so much by her experiences that she'd become the very villain that she had sought to try and depose. And it just ended with a really cold, horrible idea that this is just going to continue and continue and continue. And of course, that isn't the ending that Suzanne Collins came up with, and it's probably best that it wasn't. But the darker part of my brain sometimes thinks, oh, it would be wonderful just to cut to black at that point and have that as a very chilling, miserable ending.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. Brilliant. So we've got some questions coming into the chat. Again, if you're watching now, now's your opportunity to send them in. So please send them in. This is a question from Anya. Best and worst places for a writer's retreat?
I have never done a writer's retreat. I do reading retreats where I either take myself off somewhere to a hotel, or I do it locally at a local leisure centre. But I've just done one this week where I go away for a whole week and just read. I don't generally write or do much else. I just read books all day, every day, and it's joyous. I really love the immersion kind of in reading that gives me. But I've never done a writer's retreat, so I don't know if I can answer in the best way. But I imagine a lovely place would be somewhere kind of cozy, maybe with other things like a swimming pool or a nice lounge or that kind of thing, where one can write and then rest and that kind of thing. In terms of a worst place, probably if one sat down in the middle of B&Q or Asda or something and tried to try to write amidst the aisles or somewhere. Yeah, somewhere very busy. I don't know if would be very conducive, but yeah, I think.
Yeah, Annie says that sounds like so much fun. Obviously, reading retreats. Yeah, I mean, obviously, lots of people say in order to be a writer, you have to be a reader too. So yeah, why not do that? Yeah, there was a question off the back of that I was going to ask. Oh, that was it. The Winter Guest. Why did you decide to set that in Scotland?
I'm not too sure. I think I wanted it to be the Highlands of Scotland, somewhere where one of my closest friends used to live, and I used to go and visit her there, and I loved it, absolutely loved it there. I think it appeals to me because I do not like sunshine. Sunny days are not my favorite kind of days. I like dark and overcast days, and I think the Highlands of Scotland has some of the least amount of sunshine in the whole of the UK. So whenever I was there, I loved the fact it was just constant cloud cover, and I think that appeals to the part of me that loves the autumn and winter vibes. So when it came to writing The Winter Visitor, I think I knew I wanted it to be set somewhere that would feel quite cozy and wintry, and also quite remote, because it's quite important to the plot that the family are very much closed in and can't leave. So I needed all those elements. And there was actually a strange legal issue that actually was complicated by me setting it in Scotland, because Scotland, of course, has different laws than England on some things. And I won't say what it is because it's a bit of a plot spoiler, but there was a legal issue that my editor kind of flagged, saying in Scotland that's actually illegal, whereas it isn't in England. And I had to find a way of working around that. So yeah, that temporarily caused a bit of a worry, but it was fine. We solved it. But yeah, generally speaking, I wanted it for the vibes. I think for the sort of the cozy wintry vibes.
Nice, brilliant. So Chris has sent in a question. Thank you, Chris, for your question. Was there a particular writer or particular book that inspired you to become a writer?
I think I've already mentioned Agatha Christie, but I think I have to mention her again. I think discovering Agatha Christie aged 11 or 12, and I think having the joy of not only discovering an author I loved the books of, but also realizing she wrote like 77 of them. So I wasn't going to run out anytime soon. And I think she helped crystallize for me what I liked from books and what I would hope to give readers. I also think probably more modern day psychological thriller authors helped me move towards this genre now. And although I've said The Winter Visitor is my most Agatha Christie-ish of my books, I think most of my thrillers are probably more similar to the writings of, say, Ruth Rendell or Minette Walters. And And these were the authors I think I discovered after Christie, and I think authors that wrote very complex, dark, modern day or modern to when they were writing, or at least more modern than Christie's feel to us now, set in kind of contemporary, often suburban worlds, amidst people that we could kind of very easily imagine meeting in everyday life. And I think the gritty realism of those kind of infused with the more kind of classic mystery appealed to me. And I think it was pretty a mixture of those two things. I think at the time I didn't realize I was reading psychological thrillers. I think the books Ruth Rendell wrote were quite often just put into crime, the same as Minette Walters. And I think it's only more recently we've come to think of there being more kind of pillars within genres in a more defined sense, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. So we've got a few minutes left. If you're watching now live, please feel free to send in a question. We'll try and get them in. We might do a quick fire around if we get a few more questions. But again, we have another staple question. And obviously 10 books in, the Winter Visitor out shortly as well. This is quite a difficult one for some people. But you're on your deathbed, you're looking back at your writing career. What would you be happy with? What is success to you?
I think for me, it's just writing the books I enjoy writing. Really, it's quite simple, and I feel like I have done that and continue to do that. So I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, no, brilliant. So with the Winter Visitor, then, what's your what can readers expect that maybe they haven't seen in your books before?
I think it's probably my most liked of my books. I say that cautiously because there are murders, there are dead bodies, there are disposing of bodies. That this isn't Gilmore Girls, but it's I think slightly lighter in tone than some of my other books, and there's probably more slightly humorous family dynamics that go on, and there's probably a bit more time spent with that rather than the darker, more grisly side. And I've had some very, very dark books in the past, like my book Notes on a Murder involved a very, very disturbing island where things like murder and torture happened. And this is definitely not that. This is much more of the lighter side of crime, where it's kind of more the mystery and the family dynamics that are at the heart of it rather than anything too hard hitting. So I think that's probably the most different aspect of it. Although having said that, people who have enjoyed my darker books will hopefully still find shades of that within this. So fingers crossed it pleases everyone. That's the aim.
And on that, if somebody was listening or watching this now and they hadn't read any of your books, which of your books would you recommend they start with?
I think, mentioned The Dinner Guest, that was my first bestseller, and people seem to really respond to that book. I think, and my book, The Garden Party, which came out last year, people seem to have responded really well to. I think it depends slightly whether one likes the darker side or the lighter side. Probably The Dinner Guest or The Winter Visitor is a quite good starting off points if one doesn't like things too dark. But if darkness is your thing, I'd say pick up my book Notes on a Murder or Hold Your Breath. Or if you like horror, go with Scuttle. But in terms of the psych thrillers, probably Notes on a Murder is still a psychological thriller, but a very dark one.
Brilliant. And we have got a question from Halo, so I'm just going to squeeze it in there. But has a writing idea / your imagination ever scared you?
No, I don't think it has. I don't think anything has ever scared me from my imagination. I think maybe if I was writing, I have just finished writing another horror book actually, and that did involve quite brutal things in it that made me think, oh, is that too strong? But never anything too specific or horrendous so far. So maybe one day, but yeah, nothing too bad.
Maybe one day. Right. So before we go, what we ask is if you could just give us all your lovely information. So if people listening or watching back, if they wanted to stalk you, if they wanted to buy your books, not so much stalking, but you know what I mean, in terms of just go finding you on all the social medias and things like that. So where can they find you and where can they buy your books?
The books are available to buy in bookshops and, of course, online retailers like Waterstones.com and Amazon, and Audible. I love audiobooks, so yeah, they're definitely available to download on there. And you can find me on the major social media platforms. I'm BP Walter Author on Instagram. Instagram's probably my most active, but I'm also on Facebook as BP Walter Author, and on Twitter or X as Barnaby Walter. So yes, I can be found and contactable on all of those.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's the end of the show. Thank you very much for watching. Again, we might do a little after show after this, so if you're interested in sticking around and having a chat about all things writing, obviously we move away from the sort of the guest format, but it's more casual. So yeah, if you're into that, we might go live on TikTok and things. But thank you so much for listening. If you're writing this weekend, please get in touch with us. Just let us know what you're doing, where you're up to, because we love to support the authors of the show and the people who listen to the show as well. But yeah, that's it from me. Anything left from you, BP?
No, that is everything. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been great to chat.
Brilliant. So that's the final bit of the show, everyone. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you same time next week. Thank you. Have a good weekend.